Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jayam Vishnupada Paramahansa Parivrajikacharya Stotara Sarashi Srimad Divine Grace Oshi Bhaktivedanta Goswami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Jayam Vishnupada Paramahansa Parivrajikacharya Stotara Sarashi Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Chekaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shamakunda Radhakunda Giri Govardhana Ki Jai Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Shri Navadvip Dham Ki Jai Shri Mayapur Dham Ki Jai Shri Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai Tulasi Devi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Gangamaya Ki Jai Chamunamaya Ki Jai Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol Shamaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai All glories to the assembled devotees All glories to the assembled devotees All glories to the assembled devotees All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga Narayam Naraskricham Naram Chaipam Narotamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayat Nasta Prayeshu Abardeshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttamashlokir Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki Reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam second canto 4th chapter 18th verse Kirtan Hundara Pulinda Pulkasha Avira Avira Shumba Yavana Kasadaya Yene Chapapa Yarapashrayashraya Sudyanti Taisme Prabhavishnave Namaha Kirata Hundara Pulinda Pulkasha Abhira Sumbha Yavana Kasharaya Yene Chabapa Yarapashraya Shrayaha Shriyanti Tasme Prabhavishnave Namaha Kirata Hundara Pulinda Pulkasha Abhira Shumba Yavana Kasharaya Yene Chabapa Yarapi Shraya Shraya Sudyanti Tasme Prabhavishnave Namaha Kirata Hundara Pulinda Pulkasha Abhira Shumbha Yadava Kisharaya Yanye Prapapa Yarapashraya Shraya Shudyanti Tasmai Prabhavishnave Namaha Abhira Shumba Yavana Kasharaya Nibanda Yarapashraya Shraya Sudyanti Tasmai Prabhavishnave Namaha Karata, a province of Old Bharata, Pune, part of Germany and Russia, Andhra, a province of southern India, Pulinda, the Greeks, Pulkasha, another province, Abhira, part of Old Sind, Shumbaha, province, Ye, even those, Anye, others, Cha, also, Papaha, addicted to sinful acts, Yat, whose, Apashrayaha, Ashrayaha, having taken shelter of the devotees of the Lord, having taken shelter of the devotees of the Lord. Shudyanti, at once purified. Tasmai, unto him. Prabhavishnave, unto the powerful Vishnu. Namaha, my respectful obeisances. Translation. Kirata, Huna, Andhra, Pulinda, Pulkasha, Abhira, Shumba, Yavana, members of the Kasha races and even others addicted to sinful acts can be purified by taking shelter of the devotees of the Lord, due to his being the supreme power. I beg to offer my respectful obeisances unto him. Responsively, Kirata, Huna, Andhra, Pulinda, Pulkasha, Abhira, Shumba, Yavana, members of the Kasa races, and even others addicted to sinful acts can be purified by taking shelter of the devotees of the Lord, due to his being the supreme power. I beg to offer my respectful obeisances unto him. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Kind of a long purport, but we'll get through it. Kirata, a province of old Bharata Varsha, mentioned in the Bhishma Parva of Mahabharata. Generally, the Kiratas are known as the aboriginal tribes of India, and in modern days, the Santal Parganas in Bihar and Chota Nagpur might comprise the old province named Kirata. Huna, The area of East Germany and part of Russia is known as the province of the Hunas. Accordingly, sometimes a kind of hill tribe is known as the Hunas. I think we have Huns in this country, right? Hooligans or something like that. Andhra, a province in southern India mentioned in the Bhishma Parva of Mahabharata. It is still extant under the same name. Pulinda, it is mentioned in the Mahabharata, Adi Parva 174.38, namely, the inhabitants of the province of the name Pulinda. The country was conquered by Bhishma Dev and Sahadeva. This country was conquered by Bhishma Dev and Sahadeva. The Greeks are known as Pulindas, and it is mentioned in the Vana Parva of Mahabharata that the non-Vedic race of this part of the world would rule over the world. Thus, Pulinda province was also one of the provinces of Bharata, and the inhabitants were classified amongst the Kshatriya kings. But later on, due to their giving up the Brahminical culture, they were mentioned as Malechas, just as those who are not followers of the Islamic culture are called Kafirs, and those who are not followers of the Christian culture are called heathens. Abira. This name also appears in the Mahabharata, both in the Sabha Parva and Bhishma Parva. It is mentioned that this province was situated on the river Saraswati in Sindh. The modern Sindh province formerly extended to the other side of the Arabian Sea, and all the inhabitants of that province were known as Abiras. They were under the domination of Maharaj Yudhisthira, and according to the statements of Markandeya, the Malechas of this part of the world would also rule over Bharata. Later on, this proved to be true, as the case of the Pulindas. On behalf of the Pulindas, Alexander the Great conquered India, and on behalf of the Abiras, Muhammad Ghori conquered India. These Abiras were formerly Kshatriyas within the Brahminical culture, but they gave up the connection. The Kshatriyas, who were afraid of Parashurama and had hidden themselves in the Caucasian hilly regions, later on became known as the Abiras, and the place they inhabited was known as Abira Desha. Shumbas and Kankas, the inhabitants of the Kanka province of Old Bharata, mentioned in the Mahabharata. Yavanas. Yavana was the name of one of the sons of Maharaj Yayati, who was given the part of the world known as Turkey to rule. Therefore, the Turks are Yavanas, due to being descendants of Maharaj Yavana. The Yavanas of Maharaj Yavana, it says. The Yavanas were therefore Kshatriyas, and later on, by giving up the Brahminical culture, they became Mlecha Yavanas. Descriptions of the Yavanas are in the Mahabharata, Adi Parva 85.34. Another prince conquered by Sahadev and the Pandavas. Another prince, conquered by Sahadev and the Pandavas. The Western Yavana joined with Duryodhana in the battle of Kurukshetra under the pressure of Karna. It is also foretold that these Yavanas would also conquer India, and it proved to be true. Kasa, the inhabitants of the Kasa Desha, are mentioned in the Mahabharata, Drona Parva. Those who have a stunted growth of hair on their upper lip are generally called Kasas. As such, the Kasa are the Mongolians, the Chinese, and others who are so designated. The above-mentioned historical names are different names of the world. Even those who are constantly engaged in sinful acts are all corrigible to the standard of perfect human beings if they take shelter of the devotees of the Lord. Jesus Christ and Muhammad, two powerful devotees of the Lord, have done tremendous service on behalf of the Lord on the surface of the globe. And from the version of Srila Shukadeva Goswami, it appears that instead of running a godless civilization in the present context of the world situation, if the leadership of world affairs is entrusted to the devotees of the Lord, for which a worldwide organization under the name and style of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness has already been started. Then, by the grace of the Almighty Lord, there can be a thorough change of heart in human beings all over the world, because the devotees of the Lord are able authorities to effect such a change by purifying the dust-worn minds of the people in general. The politicians of the world may remain in their respective positions because the pure devotees of the Lord are not interested in political affairs, political leadership, or diplomatic implications. The devotees are interested only in seeing that the people in general are not misguided by political propaganda, and in seeing that the valuable life of a human being is not spoiled by It is not spoiled in following a type of civilization which is ultimately doomed. If the politicians, therefore, would be guided by the good counsel of the devotees, then certainly there would be a great change in the world situation by the purifying propaganda of the devotees, as shown by Lord Chaitanya. As Shukadeva Goswami began his prayer by discussing the word Yat Kirtanam, so also Lord Chaitanya recommended that simply by glorifying the Lord's holy name, a tremendous change of heart can take place, by which the complete misunderstanding between the human nations created by politicians can at once be extinguished. And after the extinction of the fire of misunderstanding, other prophets will follow. The destination is to go back home, back to Godhead, as we have several times discussed in these pages. According to the cult of devotion, generally known as the Vaishnava cult, there is no bar against anyone's advancing in the matter of God realization. A Vaishnava is powerful enough to turn into a Vaishnava, even the Kirata, etc., as above mentioned. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is said that by the Lord, that there is no bar to becoming a devotee of the Lord, even for those who are low-born or women, Shudras or Vaishyas. And by becoming a devotee, everyone is eligible to return home back to Godhead. The only qualification is that one takes shelter of a pure devotee of the Lord, who has thorough knowledge in the transcendental science of Krishna, Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. Anyone from any part of the world who becomes well conversant in the science of Krishna becomes a pure devotee and a spiritual master for the general mass of the people, and may reclaim them by purification of heart. Though a person be even the most sinful man, he can at once be purified by a systematic contact with the pure Vaishnava. A Vaishnava, therefore, can accept a bona fide disciple from any part of the world without any consideration of caste and creed, and promote him by regulative principles to the status of a pure Vaishnava who is transcendental to Brahminical culture. The system of caste or varnashram dharma is no longer regular, even amongst the so-called followers of the system. Nor is it now possible to reestablish the institutional function in the present context of social, political, and economic revolution. Without any reference to the particular custom of a country, one can be accepted to the Vaishnava cult spiritually, and there is no hindrance in the transcendental process. So, by the order of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the cult of Srimad Bhagavatam, or the Bhagavad Gita, can be preached all over the world, reclaiming all persons willing to accept the transcendental cult. Such cultural propaganda by the devotees will certainly be accepted by all persons who are reasonable and inquisitive, without any particular bias for the custom of the country. The Vaishnava never accepts another Vaishnava on the basis of birthright, as he never thinks of the deity of the Lord in a temple as an idol. And to remove all doubts in this connection, Srila Shukadeva Goswami has invoked the blessings of the Lord, who is all-powerful, Prabha Vishnave Namaha. As the all-powerful Lord accepts the humble service of his devotees in devotional activities in the Archana, his form as the worshipable deity in the temples Similarly, the body of a pure Vaishnava changes transcendently at once when he gives himself up to the service of the Lord and is trained by a qualified Vaishnava. The injunction of Vaishnava regulation in this connection runs as follows: Arche Vishnu, Shiladir Gurusho, Naramatir Vaishnave, Jati Buddhihi, Shri Vishnur Namni, Shabda Samana Buddhi, etc. One should not consider the deity of, this is the translation, quote, one should not consider the deity of the Lord as worshipped in the temple to be an idol, nor should one consider the authorized spiritual master as an ordinary man, unquote. Nor should one consider a pure Vaishnava to belong to a particular caste, etc. Paren, Padma Purana, end paren. The conclusion is that the Lord, being all-powerful, can, under any and every circumstance, accept anyone from any part of the world, either personally or through his bona fide manifestation as the spiritual master. Lord Chaitanya accepted many devotees from communities other than the Varnashramites, and he himself declared to teach us that he does not belong to any caste or social order of life, but that he is the eternal servant of the Lord, who maintains the damsels of Vrindavan. Paren, Lord Krishna, and Paren. That is the way of self-realization. Salakaya Chaksurun Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangam Langayate Girim Yatkaripa Tarham Bande Shri Guru Dinatarane. Seems that Prabhupada has gone into a lot of history here, things that are stated in the Mahabharata, which I haven't read all of. I've read part of it, but it's very interesting. And he's told us on many occasions that the world was all under one king at one time, and then it gradually fragmented into different countries. I was listening to some talks that he gave in 1972 after Nectar of Devotion was written. Mostly they were talks in Vrindavan in India, and he was getting on the case of his compatriots, which is kind of relevant to this, what we read in the purport. He was saying that we should welcome these foreigners, even though they have a different look and their skin is colored different, instead of trying to drive them away and making propaganda against them, which is going on even today as we speak. Not as much, but it was especially in the earlier times difficult for Americans and Europeans to propagate Krishna consciousness in India, because in their private conversations and studies in their ivory towers or chambers, some of the elders of that part of the world were dismissive. They thought that Prabhupada was just after money and wealth and so on, and followers. So even though he was preaching in India, he got on the case of his compatriots, because there was an obvious bias against the so-called white people of the West. So this is indicative, and as Prabhupada has written here in the purport, that everybody, even the so-called dog eaters, can become elevated to Krishna consciousness. I think Prabhupada was giving a talk at a Franciscan seminary in Melbourne some time ago, and one of the questions one of the brothers asked him was about Jesus Christ, or what his opinion of it was. And Prabhupada said, and I think I read this in the Transcendental Adventure, somewhere I heard it or read it, that he said, "He is our Guru, Jesus Christ, He is our Guru." And I thought that was one of the best one-liners, so-called, that Prabhupada ever intoned. He is our Guru. I mean, everybody knows what a Guru is. It's an English word now. But to say that Jesus Christ is our Guru is like the perfection of the Savai Pumso Parodharmo verse, that everyone can, this is the occupational duty of everyone. And it doesn't matter whether we're Christian, Jewish, Mohammedan, or Hindu, but we have that kind of ecumenical, you might say, feeling. It's not Hindu. And Prabhupada even indicated that he was challenged by some people that came to him in Vrindavan and said that there was a time when the Christian missionaries were coming to India and converting the Hindus to Christianity, and now you're converting Christians to Hinduism. And Prabhupada's response was that I never said that this is Hindu. I never said that. And he asked the devotees, some of you who are old timers, if that's true. And I didn't hear any answers, but I heard that on several occasions, Prabhupada's teaching was that Krishna consciousness is not Hinduism. It's not Christianism. It's Christianity or Mohammedanism or Islam or Jewish. It's just love of God, and that can be done in any religion. I've even at interfaith meetings met some people of other faiths. They weren't Hindu. They were probably of Christian or theologians or something like that. And there was an element of a love of God in there, of a bhakti, even though it's a little different than what devotees follow, and not as mature. I think on several occasions Prabhupada said that all these scriptures have a ring of truth in them. They're like dictionaries that are partial or collegiate dictionaries. They're not the full understanding. They're not fully philosophically correct. The philosophy of Krishna consciousness is actually quite sophisticated, because and one of the things that is a bit irritating is that people take parts of the philosophy and designate them as being always true in all places at all times. That's kind of a form of what we might call intellectual dishonesty. Take something out of context and say that it's always true for all time. And just at the very moment, people I've heard are taking excerpts or phrases or words out of some of the lectures that people are giving, saying that they're not politically correct. And in some cases, that's probably true, but the essence of Prabhupada's teachings are in his books and his public lectures. Even though they may irritate someone, they're always true. It's interesting that some of these words have migrated into our language, like fakirs, or they're like fakers, or they're infidels. One time I heard that Prabhupada was invited to appear at the Jagannath Puri temple, but because his disciples were not allowed to go in there were a group of pandas or priests that won't admit anyone from the West into there. And so although he was invited, Prabhupada refused to enter that temple because he wanted to show that it was unjust, that it was not proper. And this verse in particular says that anyone in any part of the world, of any age, of any gender, of any faith, of any belief, of any age, of any part of the world can become a devotee, can even become a spiritual master and fully conscious. And this was objected to by a certain class of people in that part of the world. Very, very, what's the word? Narrow-mindedness was prominent, and as I said before, Prabhupada had to fight for the right to preach even in his own land, because people were very against the Westerners taking up. They thought that they weren't the real thing, the real genuine article. You had to be Indian to of course, nowadays there's a lot of tension between blacks and whites, but there's still tension between blacks and whites, and there's a lot of tension between browns and whites and browns. It's all, but the basic teaching of Krishna consciousness is that we're not the body. And therefore we can't, even though there's a lot of advocates of black power, white power, brown power, Chinese power, Indonesian power, this and that, none of those things is accurate, because all of us are spirit souls. We're not Indonesian or Chinese or anything like that. And if one understands that's the basic understanding of the first principle, we might say, of Krishna consciousness, then instead of being an advocate of black power or white power or brown power or Chinese power, something like that, we can see that there's a real family of human beings that's not not part of a particular age or race or country or gender or anything like that. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but there's a guy named Shashi Tharoor. I think he's a parliamentarian, or was a parliamentarian in India. And his philosophy is that Britain should make amends and apologize to India for all the atrocities that they commit. Of course, they're never going to do it, but that's his point. Not that they should pay money in reparation form, but he feels that they owe them an apology. So this tension is going on all over the world: racial tension, colonial tension, empirical tension. And just like England was very powerful at one time, America has become very powerful now. And even though it's very powerful and very corrupt, Prabhupada liked that country because it's where Krishna consciousness started. And I heard that when the Happening record was produced in New York City, that Prabhupada bowed down and kissed the floor of the recording studio, a gesture of thinking that this was the country that he could be successful in his mission, even though it's a very, very corrupt country. But he was aware that there was a lot of tension at that time, not so much now, but at that time there was the Cold War between the former Soviet Union and the United States. But he really liked the United States because at least they had some churches and there was some token belief in God, whereas communism under the Bolsheviks from 1914 to about 1990 was very firmly atheistic. So he kind of tended to side with the Americans. And even though there's a lot of corruption and a lot of strangeness going on and violence and tension in that country, Prabhupada liked it because Krishna consciousness started there. And so I'm probably a little bit jingoistic, or what's that word mean? Very patriotic, because I come from that country. But it's true that it started there. And even though there was a lot of tension against it, there was a feeling of freedom, of doing whatever you wanted to do, even though some people really didn't like it. One of the Christian creationists recently said that he was in China, and he said that in China you can't criticize the government. And in your country, America, he was an American, he said, in your country you can't criticize Charles Darwin. So there was and that was one of Srila Prabhupada's big missions in the latter part of his life, was to challenge the scientists and their atheistic view, their emasculation of God from almost every sphere of study. And he knew that just like people today, they worship sports fans and sports in general. People think that science has got the answer. And when Bill Clinton was the president of the United States, he even opined that the Genome Project was a great advancement in civilization. That they had mastered the idea that people could be reduced to molecules and atoms, and they could live forever, and so on. One person said that even if they could live, I read this in some Newsweek article, could live for hundreds of years, they would be brainless. I mean, they would just be walking robots. So this doesn't really lead anywhere to adopt the mechanistic or atheistic view of life. It's not really scientific. I mean, science, it means to accept everything, whether it's unusual or different, or whether it's godly, or whether it's from a different part of the world. It should be accepted and reasoned. And what's happening now is that there's a major it's not really a conspiracy of people that sit in smoke-filled back rooms and plan to overthrow the world, although there's those kind of theories that are out there. But it's just something that happens, and it's part of the age of Kali, that people become very atheistic and attached to the mechanistic view of life. So this is a very long purport, and we could probably talk about this for lifetimes, but I'm going to end here. Anyways, if anyone has any comments or questions, please fire away. I'll read the verse again, if I can find it here. Kirata Huna Andhra Pulanda Pulakasha Abhira Shumba, Yavana, members of the Kasa races and even others addicted to sinful acts can be purified by taking shelter of the devotees of the Lord, due to his being the supreme power. I beg to offer my respectful obeisances. I know that Prabhupada quoted this verse and knew the Sanskrit to it many, many times. It was like a sort of flagship verse of the Krishna consciousness movement, that it didn't matter what a person was, whether they were sinful in their past or whatever, they were qualified to be devotees. So that's that verse, and if there's any comments or questions, please ask or say.
Thank you very much. I'm just wondering, this idea that we can all become one in Krishna consciousness, that is all these political and social needs and habits around the world, is the Krishna consciousness movement is going to transcend the boundaries within the very variety that's going to be in terms of communism and so many other isms in the world. In other words, is there such a thing as a Krishna conscious political ideology that would work worldwide, or we just work what's there and transcendental?
There was a time when some devotees were running for political office, to be governor or something like that, and I think there's still some people that want to do that. But Prabhupada said that told us that we shouldn't get involved in politics because it's a very sort of dirty business. I mean, there are people that know how to do it, I suppose, but I'm not one of them. But in general, Krishna consciousness started without any political agendas, and it's become successful without any political agendas. So the idea is that people that are Brahminical can advise, that's the way at least it was in the past, would advise politicians, and the politicians were Raja Rishis. They were saintly people. People loved them, their subjects loved them, and they loved their subjects. At the same time, though, they were able to, like Maharaj Pariksit, when he found that a cow was being tortured in his kingdom, he was ready to punish that rascal. So even though they were saintly, they were expert politicians as well. But nowadays, it's almost impossible to find such people. I mean, according to what I know. It's been said that certain countries like Mauritius might be the first Krishna conscious world. It's a sort of a Hindu country, and they said that about Nepal too at one time, but I don't know. It's just what people think. And Prabhupada has said that in future, Krishna consciousness will be very powerful, and that it will include the politicians. And he's on record of saying that even if a tiny percentage, 1% or 5% of the people become Krishna conscious, then the face of the whole world will change. Of course, there's a lot of opposition to that, but it's been said in the Bharisha Purana and the one of the other Puranas that there would be in the time of Kali Yuga a golden age in which it would be like Satya Yuga in the midst of Kali Yuga. And some people think it's already started, and other people think it's still quite a ways away. There's no time frame given us. That's why there's a lot of speculation about when it's occurring. It just says in Kali Yuga, but it's pretty vague. Any other points? Okay, we'll stop there. Hare Krishna. Thank you.